I wanted to do something today that I've never done before on this channel, and that is do a book review, or I guess less a book review and more of a philosophical exploration of the meaning of a book. And that book in question is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, which I just finished today, and has left me with so many thoughts and just rich um, pr profundity of meaning. Um, and I really just wanted to use this space to explore uh, my reflections and impressions of the book, which I'm sure will certainly not scratch the surface of all of the interpretations and angles that one can take uh, when engaging with this incredible book. Um, and so I think because this is one of the best-selling novels of all time, and I'm sure many who might listen to this will have already read it, and to spare a lot of content for the people who haven't, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time summarizing the contents of the book, although obviously in talking about the book, um, its plot will come out. But I think I'm going to start at the end, just because I think it takes such a dramatic turn in the last 30, 40, 50 pages that really just, I think, underscore the genius of Dickens in this book. Um, so, in the last part of the book, Charles Darnay, who uh, was a French aristocrat who became so disenchanted with the aristocracy at the time of the French Revolution and the behaviors that they were exhibiting, who left because of that to London, and then found himself back in Paris, where he left before the revolution and then came back as the revolution was happening, when to be associated with the aristocracy meant you were public enemy number one in the eyes of the revolution. And he found himself framed by this woman, Madame Defarge, who was this um, zealous, fervently passionate revolutionary who hated the aristocracy with every ounce of her body. Framed him for a crime he did not commit, and he found himself in line in the guillotine. And his father-in-law, Alexander Manette, a well-known doctor in the area, who was also a former prisoner, um, prisoner of the Bastille, the most well-known and biggest prison in France at the time. Also convicted under false charges and spent 18 years in the Bastille. Um, to be a former prisoner of the Bastille in the Revolution gave you a lot of clout, and so he tried to use that influence to advocate for Mr. Darnay's release, to no avail. And as the book is coming to a close and Mr. Darnay's fate has essentially been sealed, Sidney Carton, who is, excuse me, is a lawyer, a very disreputable one at that, by his own admission, someone who uh, kind of has no vision or guiding purpose in his life, who drinks a lot, kind of very down on his luck, but share something in common with Mr. Darnay in that they both love the same woman, the daughter of Mr. Manette, Lucy Manette. And throughout the whole book, as kind of uninspiring in many ways as Sidney is, he always has this deep affection and desire and love that is makes you want to root for him. It's just it seems to not be pointed in the right direction. It's pointed at a married woman, and he struggles to find meaning in his work, and he doesn't have a lot of close confidants and friends. And so it's the end of the book, and Mr. Darnay's fate has been sealed, and Mr. Carton, who has been mistaken for Mr. Darnay before, they look essentially the same, hatches a plan with Mr. Manette, and it's a multi-pronged plan. Firstly, is a plan to get Lucy and him to safety. Because something he's concerned about is it was a capital crime at that time to mourn any victim of someone at the hands of the guillotine. And he knew that Lucy would violate this and be targeted by the regime. And so um, he created a plan with Mr. Manette, who was well connected and who had money to place them on a boat and to set sail. I can't remember where, um, but to safety. And the second part of his plan was to swap places with Mr. Darnay. And so he devised this elaborate plan where he was going to sneak in the middle of the night, drug him, switch out their clothes, and then be carted off on I think it's called a tumbril, which is like this carriage that they put political prisoners of that time who were going to be executed on the guillotine in. And I just want to read the end of the book, and then because this book has probably one of the most well-known um, beginnings to any novel ever. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, um, and then it goes on from there. Um, I want to read the end, and then I want to talk about it a little bit, and then I want to read the beginning in light of that. So, Mr. Carton is basically um, addressing what he imagines his legacy will be, how someone in the future will react to and think about his death. It's kind of this like um, prophetic vision of some sort of a future that is sharply contrasted with the bleak present of both his personal fate and the kind of fate of France. This is gonna be a little long, but um, I see the lives for which I lay down my life, peaceful, useful, prosperous, and happy, in that England which I shall see no more. I see her, capital H, with a child upon her bosom, who bears my name. I see her father, aged and bent, but otherwise restored, and faithful to all men, in his healing office, and at peace. I see the good old man, so long their friend, in 10 years' time enriching them with all he has, and passing tranquilly to his reward. I see that I hold a sanctuary in their hearts, and in the hearts of their descendants, generations hence. I see her, an old woman, weeping for me on the anniversary of this day. I see her and her husband, their course done, lying side by side in their last earthly bed. And I know that each was not more honored and held sacred in the other's soul than I was in the souls of both. I see that child who lay upon her bosom and who bore my name, a man, winning his way up in that path of life which once was mine. I see him winning it so well that my name is made illustrious there by the light of his. I see the blots I threw upon it faded away. I see him, foremost of just judges and honored men, bringing a boy of my name, with a forehead that I know and golden hair, to this place, then fair to look upon, with not a trace of this day's disfigurement. And I hear him tell the child my story, with a tender and a faltering voice. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known. The end. And that last sentence just it just got to me. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I've ever known. You know, you think about this man who sacrifices himself to make sure and before that prepares for the woman that he loves, whom he is not married to, whom, even if Charles Darnay was the one who got executed, would probably never end up with. And maybe part of him knew that, who prepares safe passage for Lucy to, you know, um, survive and escape and ensures that Charles ends up with her and sacrifices himself in order for that to happen. Um, and that on its own is an incredible act of sacrifice. But I think it's even deeper than just, his love for Lucy and wanting her to um, stay with her husband. I, I think Sydney finally finds what his life is ultimately meant for. And it's never explicitly stated the religiosity of any character, but the Bible verse from John 11, um, where Jesus is talking about where Jesus has just resurrected, and he's talking to Martha, who um, is worried or is grieving her brother who died on the cross. And she says, um, where is it? Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. And Jesus says, your brother will rise again. So that's the backstory. But the quote that was shared multiple times in the book is, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And Sydney grasps onto this newfound identity of, instead of being consumed with himself and, drinking and like kind of wallowing in his own self-pity, he dies to himself and does so. I mean, it's like you can think about it mirroring the story of Christ, like dying for, I mean, and Charles Darnay wasn't even dying for his own sins or his own crimes, but assuming the crucifixion of someone else in order that someone else can prosper, someone else can continue to live. And who knows what the fate of Charles Darnay would be. I'm only speculating that him and Lucy would be able to um, live happily ever after. The story doesn't end that way. It's the reign of terror, and he has a scarlet letter on his back, being an aristocrat. But the the profundity of a character that up until now was not this heroic, saintly, self-sacrificial character in a society that was bloodthirsty, was vengeful, was incredibly egotistical and selfish on all fronts, from the aristocrats and the bankers and the tax collectors to the peasant class who overthrew them, who then just re-perpetuated the same mob rule. Um, to have a shining example of virtuosity in that, in such an unexpected, it's such a turn. I think that's what makes the novel so incredible, is that it's not like this hero that had always been a hero. Much the opposite. Um, you know, there really is no like obvious kingly hero in the story. It's it's a bunch of ordinary people who are trying to keep their sanity when they are being wrongfully, unfairly targeted, and trying not to stoop down to the level of others around them. And actually the the stakes of the moment, as opposed to what it did to a lot of the French, was to to make them revert back to much more animalistic tribal behavior. The characters in the story actually rise into more virtue. And I think the theme of resurrection, not just we're looking at the micro level, but the speech of Carton at the end can really be seen as a belief in and hope for a resurrection of France. That the great tragedy of the French Revolution, as compared to, with all of its flaws, the American Revolution, is that liberté, égalité, and fraternité were not um, realized visions. And actually, Robespierre, then Napoleon, were in some senses worse examples of the very things the proletariats were fighting for in trying to overthrow Louis the 16th, 15th, um, during the revolution. And this holding on to belief of a apocalypse leading to divine revelation and redemption, um, is certainly a theme in the book. And Yeah, I mean, there's and so in light of that, I want to read the beginning. It's just such an iconic. And then I want to talk about something I only learned about after I read the book that I was not sure about what it meant when I was reading it, which is the installments of the book and what to make of that and how to think about this novel in light of how this book was disseminated to the public. So, okay, the beginning. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received, for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only. So good. So good. And that is such a um such a what's the word? Foundation or skeleton that can be grafted onto so many different aspects of this book. That polarity. Um and then, the real drama of the book is when those polarities meet. When Charles Darnay, who had been living in England, comes back to France. Um, when when these two worlds collide. And I was just listening to a podcast episode where two guys were breaking down this book, and they brought up something interesting that, London and France are not very far apart, and historically, bitter military rivals. And a lot of people in Britain were worried that what had just happened in France would happen in the UK. And that fear was, you know, I can imagine certainly palpable. I mean, the spirit of the American Revolution spread across the Atlantic. So, what's stopping the British from taking up arms against their own king? Um, and so this this idea of these poles and how they both exist simultaneously. Um, they both exist at a socio-political level simultaneously. They also both exist within us. We all have capacities for heavenly action. We also have capacities for hellish impulse and temptation. And which one is going to triumph, you know? Um, and what is what is the difference between purporting one, but then acting out another? And I think that's the great irony of the French Revolution is you have you have people claiming that they are on the side of wisdom, but then acting in an incredibly foolish way. Um, Makes me think of The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by, I always forget the author's name, I think is Paulo Freire. Uh, and one claim he makes is so often in revolutions, the oppressed become the oppressors because they fail to, well, essentially they fail to forgive. Um, and make this, as my friend Daniel Garner talks about, this non-rational move, this move that defies conventional rational thought, which is to say to the very people who have been wronging you and oppressing you, I forgive, and not I condone, and not I won't actually attempt to overthrow this, but in the wake of that, um, I'm not. What is it that I'm leading with? Am I leading with vengefulness and hatred, and actually the same amount of um, discriminatory zeal, or am I really trying to create a world and a society where the good life can be attainable for as many people as possible? And, speaking of non-rationality, what Sydney does at the end is the epitome of that. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for him, it doesn't make any sense for him to do this. Like, saving the man who loves the woman he loves, um, he's gonna gain absolutely nothing from that. Um, and you know, and here's the thing, no one will know because he looks exactly the same as this guy, and he did all of that in secret. So he's not gonna be heralded as this martyr or thought of as, this great hero. He wasn't really known to anybody anyways. Um, but he nevertheless decides decides to do that, and it's such a turn, an unexpected turn. Um, and I think points to something quite profound in this book, which is like heroes, I don't know, heroes wear capes, but heroes come in unexpected moments and from unexpected people. Um, yeah, it's oh, it makes me think of the philosophical idea, the coincidence of opposites, which goes back to Heraclitus, who talks about the tension of a bow and the tension of a lyre and the resolution of that is to hold that tension until it's released, um and the idea that when oppositional energies actually find harmony, well, it goes back in the West to that, the yin yang symbol is an exemplification of that. And people throughout the ages, Erigena and many others have talked about this idea. Um, and I think what Carton does at the end, while really no other character in the book, well, I guess the the backdrop of the revolutionaries never got to this place of harmony with the opposites, of the two cities, of the two extremes, coming together. Um, what Carton did at the end, a character who exemplified, the foolishness, the rashness, um, the impulsivity, the kind of nihilistic, trying to just look for the adjectives um, that were used in the beginning here. The incredulity and the darkness. right? The drinking. Someone who represented that to actually move and transform into the other, I think is this beautiful example at the end of the book of I think Dickens attempting to create a new beatific vision for the path forward. At that time, I think he was writing about 80, 90 years after the French Revolution, um, on the heels of the new century and the new World War. Um, and this example of this character actually being able to marry these two poles when for all the virtue of some of the other characters in this novel, they were kind of always virtuous. Um, but he's really the one that has this huge leap in consciousness and in perspective. And I think that's what makes this book so amazing, so beautiful, is this transformation in a very unlikely time, in a very unlikely place, from a very unlikely person. I think that's all I have for now. Please, if any of this resonated or any of this struck a chord, please leave me a comment. Means a lot. And I hope to maybe be doing more of this in the future. I really enjoyed being able to just think out loud and deepen my understanding of the book and my connection to it as a result. So thank you so much. Till next time.